All right, we are starting our assignment 2 project. We're going to find all the intro deals to that, intro materials for that under Unit 5. We're still learning compositing. We're still utilizing those same skills and adding on to them. In Unit 4, we composited a fantasy landscape out of 5 different sources. Here we're going to be compositing a fantasy creature, a creature concept, using at least 5 different high-quality references, other people's pixels. And we're going to control it by doing what I call a skeletal template sketch, where we understand the anatomy and the desire of the silhouette of the creature. Now, we're a little bit informed by the fantasy landscape we made. So I did kind of a Skeletor landscape, right? As part of this unit, there is a question of the day. There's only 4 through the semester. And this one is the one that has required reading. So this is also in the course outline from a while ago. This is chapter 2 of our online textbook reading. And it's all about copyright. And it will go through fair use, public domain, Creative Commons, and the importance of licensing your work, and what the exceptions are, like fair use and fair appropriation. And also good image mining, stuff like that. So that's the entirety of the reading. It is not long, but because this has to do with laws and legal definitions, I really need you to read through this to inform your answering of this question. And then that will inform our discussion as well. So what responsibilities and rights does an artist have when using /compositing found images, using other people's pixels, right? The legal boundaries, issues of artistic integrity, and the right to communicate a personal vision. And then a few other resources. This is a really helpful short video. This is a link to what's called the Visual Artists' Rights Act. It's really the only specific law, most recent specific law that deals with visual arts rights beyond just overall copyright laws, which were last amended in 1997 under the Sonny Bono Act, but it's nicknamed the Disney Law because it was to protect Disney's assets. So you can look through this. It's a little bit legalese. But this part, they guarantee the authors of so-called fine arts and exhibition photographs the right to claim or disclaim authorship in a work. That's why sometimes you'll have movies where they have a fake director, and that's because the director has the right to strip the art of their name, right? But there might be a financial obligation to still have it released. And that's kind of a weird, unique right of visual artists, and limited rights to prevent the distortion, mutilation, or modification of a work. That's where Creative Commons comes in a lot. Like, not only can your work not be just stolen outright, but it can't, by the law, be then used and changed without your approval, right? And you'll see lots of existence of that. And then you can, under some circumstances, have the right to prevent destruction of a work, especially of a public work, like something that's incorporated into a building. So that there is a right of the author of visual works, kind of like just beyond regular copyright, that even if you sell the work, there's a right for it not to be destroyed without some sort of accommodation being made, right? So if the building is being demolished, is there some way, you did a mural for that building, is there some way it could be preserved in a way that you're satisfied with? You have the right to insist on that. So this is a pretty interesting law that very few people know about, the VARA Act of 1990. It was passed, and it hasn't been overturned. And then I have some slides, and we'll use these especially when we discuss it. And this is about appropriation. Appropriation is the action of taking something for one's own use, typically without the owner's permission, which is exactly what we've been doing for these landscapes and what we'll be doing for these creatures. But we are covered under educational fair use, educational and spontaneous fair use. But that wouldn't cover you if you want to take these projects and then sell them or do something that's not for your educational empowerment and growth. There's a great video here from Adam Ruins Everything about copyright and kind of both sides of it. And then we'll go through some of these things. I have colleagues that I've worked with, like Shepard Fairey, who did the Obama Hope poster. I know from California. And from his college days, he had to deal with cease and desist letters and paying damages for using copyrighted materials, like the WWF with Andre the Giant in the 1990s. And so he had to transform it into his own original vision in ways that he didn't get sued. And then he did get sued also for his Obama Hope poster. So we can kind of talk about that. Even though he made no money off of that, it was donated. So, interesting stuff. And then this is what comes up the most, and you're not going to like the answer. So students ask, what if I do fan art, right? What if I paint a picture of Bob from Bob's Burgers and I want to sell it at San Japan, or I want to put it on my online shop, or I do commissions and people ask me to do their favorite character in my style, right? And is that legal? Is that fine? And I give the answer. And it can be real bad legally, right? So no lawyer will ever tell you that it's fine. It's not fine. But you kind of have to see it in a bigger scope of what your risk of liability is, what your exposure is. And you can even do it for free for someone. You can even do it for your own tattoo. Like you want a Hello Kitty tattoo. You are not completely in the clear from legal action because you are breaking copyright. Even if it's your own version of it, your own stylized version. As long as it's recognizable, it's someone's intellectual property. All right. So all of that might be of great interest to you for our next question of the day. And that's part of this unit, Unit 5. We'll discuss that probably in a week or so. Did I just close everything I needed? Let's see, probably. So let's get back to the question of the day and then move on from there. Because obviously that relates to all this compositing we're doing. So what is this project? Now we're going to use our compositing skills that we learned for our landscape, and we're going to apply it towards a figurative element, right? Not something that's in the background, but something that's active, something that could be animated. And for it to move believably and work with a structure of living things, whether they're insects, whether they're invertebrates even, like jellyfish, we need to have a sense of how they would move. What structures are flexible? What structures are static? So we're going to do that by looking at inspiring silhouettes. And I'm going to recommend Pokemon, but lots of them work. And then making an original vision. So for instance, this is taking these two different Pokemon creatures and then kind of being inspired by the anatomy of both, figuring out where the cranium is, where the eyes are, where the maw is, where the spine is, where the collarbone is, where the rib cage is, where the pelvis is. Basically a skeleton stick figure of the creature so that you can then find resource materials that fit that vision. Whether it's in the air, whether it's underwater, whether it's huge or tiny. Okay, so what's our first step? We need to find some inspiration. So I started this last class, so I have my assignment 2 folder. And my inspiration were these 2 Pokemon. I like to always pick at least 2, because I don't want to just do a complete copy of a Pokemon. And then I can start sketching. Now, we just had the discussion of traditional art versus digital, and I sketched this because we were running out of time at the end of class. I just did it on the whiteboard, right? Because that was a little bit more intuitive, more quick. But let me sketch it again here just digitally, just so you can see my thinking on it, and you can kind of check your sketch to make sure it has the most necessary components. And so to do that with Photoshop, obviously, I'm going to sign into Adobe. I'm going to say New File, and I'm just going to pick a basic 8x10 by 300 or 350, and I'll call this Karl Assignment 2 sketch. The sketch will be required of this project, just like it is for your landscape assignment. And this is for Skeletor. I'm going to call it a Skeletor crab. Okay. So I'm going to use the brush tool, which we'll learn a lot more about later. And I still encourage you to do this by hand, so it can be intuitive. But if you are very comfortable digital sketching, that's just fine. And you can always sketch something multiple times. I got to get used to this new operating system and how they let me change sizes. There we go. Okay, so let's do it on a new layer. I'm going to take the opacity down a little bit. And the first shape that really matters is what's called the cranium. It's the fishbowl that holds your brain. So I can be inspired by a few different sources. I'm liking the cranium shape of this, which is more like an oval. So I draw that, right? And then on the cranium, I can draw what are called direction lines. Like if you think of an Easter egg, and you take a chicken's egg, and you look at it straight on, and then you draw an X on it, or crossbars, right? Then when you turn that egg at different angles, those lines will curve around. Does that make sense? So this is an egg looking straight ahead. This is an egg looking down at a 3/4 view. So this is the cranium looking kind of this way. That's the direction line, which is what we see here. And then that can help with where we put the ocular cavities, the holes in the skull for the eyes, for the optic nerves. Then we might have some sort of jaw. And the jaw or maw or mandible, it is attached to that cranium shape, whether it's humanoid or not. So you see in this creature, it's much more of a cranium that's looking to the side. So the eye is here, and then the jaw shape comes out like this. So this one just has this tiny jaw shape here, so I'm just going to make that a little bit bigger, and maybe that will be a different source, like I did here. Now already I can think, where do I want to get this stuff from? So maybe a tarantula for the head, maybe an ant for the mandibles. But the next important thing is what comes from the back of the cranium, and that is the spine. And if that flows through a tail, then it flows through a tail. So I might do something a little bit, just spaced a little bit differently than I drew it here, just so you can see it. So the space between the cranium, which comes at the back of the, like exactly opposite where your eye holes are, that's where your spine starts. The next structure, skeletal structure, is going to be the collarbone, which connects your shoulders and starts your rib cage. And that can be a little bit harder to tell on creatures with exoskeletons like crabs or insects, but it's still, the points of movement are the same. The joints are the same. So we're going to have a rib cage that flows back like this, and then shoulder joints here and here. And then the arms are going to come out and forward. And then instead of hands, this creature design is going to have big pincers, right? So that does look kind of crab-like. And here I can even draw through the head so I can get a sense of how those attach to the collarbone. It's really good to get this source all from one place. So I might have to think, where am I going to get that? Maybe from another kind of, like a beetle maybe. The connections with those forearms. Because I need it to look creepy. It's kind of the Skeletor world. Now below the rib cage, which is unflexible, right, you're going to have the pelvis.